This is a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, and it is the ultimate version of one of the ultimate cars. This is the most impressive Bugatti on sale at the moment. It's a handling-focused version of the Chiron, limited to 60 units for the entire world, with a sticker price of around $3.5 million. And today, I'm going to review it. Before I get started, be sure to check out Cars and Bids, which is my enthusiast car auction website for cool cars from the modern era. We have had some amazing sales recently on Cars and Bids, including this Subaru WRX STI hatchback that sold for $38,000 with only 14,000 miles, this beautiful Corvette Z06, which sold for $67,000, and this fantastic Tesla Model X, which sold for $51,000. We've done incredibly well with Teslas, and frankly, everything else on Cars and Bids. So if you're looking to sell your cool car from the 1980s and up, Cars and Bids is the best place to get the most views, the most bids, and the most money for your cool car. Check it out at carsandbids.com. I've borrowed this Chiron Pur Sport from Bugatti Newport Beach, which is, of course, the Bugatti dealership here in Newport Beach in Southern California. Bugatti Newport Beach recently got this Pur Sport into their inventory. It is the only one offered for sale right now in all of North America. The Chiron Pur Sport, currently available at Bugatti Newport Beach. So let's talk Chiron Pur Sport. The Bugatti Chiron came out back in 2016, and since then, Bugatti has released a few special edition models that enhance things a bit. There was the track-focused Chiron Sport, then there was the Chiron Super Sport with more power, and now there's this, the Chiron Pur Sport, a handling-focused version of the car designed for racetrack drivers with lighter weight and other improvements. And it isn't cheap. A regular Chiron is very expensive, but this is a step up from that. Figure around $3.5 to $4 million for this car. But it gets you a lot, around 1,500 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds, and exclusivity since Bugatti will only make 60 units of the Pur Sport for the entire world. And today, I'm going to review this one. First, I'm going to take you on a tour of it and show you all of its interesting quirks and features. Then I'll get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'll give it a Doug's score. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Chiron Pur Sport by discussing the Chiron Box. I have reviewed several Bugatti models, but I have never been able to show you the accessories that come with the Bugatti, the stuff they give you. But I'm going to do that today. You spend over $3 million for a car, you get more than just a car. You also get a box. This box, a rather sizable box, this silver box with the Bugatti logo on top, and on the front it says Chiron Pur Sport, a very beautiful, very luxurious box that comes with the car. So what is inside the box? Well, you open it up and the first thing you see is this blue folder that says Bugatti on top and Chiron in the middle. This just contains some relatively minor paperwork, a couple of documents from the factory letting you know the spec of the car. This has the certificate of origin in it. Probably when you buy it, this would also include your dealership information, your purchase documents, that sort of thing. Nothing too special. But you lift up this blue folder and you're greeted by a piece of carbon fiber that says Chiron Pur Sport. And that's the beginnings of your box. Now, you lift the foam off the first layer of your box here and you discover that this carbon fiber piece is actually a box itself. You lift it out and you can see it's trimmed to match the car. So you have blue stitching all down the sides, very beautiful, and a lot of carbon fiber, which matches a lot of the exterior carbon fiber of the car. That is this special Chiron Pur Sport matching box. So what's inside the box? Inside the box, open it up and you will find your key placed right in the center like a piece of fine jewelry. That of course unlocks and starts your Chiron. Below that you have a USB stick which says 1 of 500. Now I already mentioned the Chiron Pur Sport is 1 of 60, but they're going to make 500 total Chiron. So I guess every Chiron owner gets the 1 of 500 USB regardless of which version of the car you have. but that's in this box, the key and the USB. Now you can see in this display area, the key and USB are placed on this leather surface, which is also trimmed with light blue stitching, again to match the color of the car. Very beautiful and fantastic presentation. And you can lift these items out. You lift up this level of the box inside the box, and then you get to another piece where you have your owner's manual in here. This is the Bugatti Chiron official owner's manual, this black book. And I really love the fact that when you open it, it talks about how environmentally friendly the owner's manual is, printed on chlorine-free bleached cellulose. Thank you. That's very important to have an environmentally friendly owner's manual for your 7 mile per gallon car, but they probably have to put that in. Probably all Volkswagen Group cars have that in there. Now, one interesting thing on the next page of the owner's manual, the welcome page, you just have kind of a lot of buzzwords. It's not really very personalized. Welcome to the most dynamic Bugatti, the elegant interior, the radical steering, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really say anything too crazy, and that's generally true throughout this owner's manual. Very German, very to the point, not particularly charming or weird or frankly quirky. Now, it's also worth noting, sharing this area with the box inside the box, you have some screws in the upper left corner of this part. You also have the front license plate bracket here. So if you want to mount a front license plate on your Bugatti, this is where you can do it. I'm sure no one has ever done this, at least not in the States, but they can at least say, hey, we gave you the front license plate mount, you just chose not to use it. But anyway, you lift up this layer of foam and you get down to a lower layer of the box, and that's where you have the Bugatti car cover. That's what you see inside this bag with the Bugatti logo on it. That is your fitted Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport car cover. Also in this area, you can see there's a hole and something is missing. That's where the battery tender is located, but because this car is on display in a showroom, they've already taken the battery tender out and they're using it, but that's where it would be. And those are the contents of your Bugatti Chiron box. You buy this car, you get the box, and that's what's inside. Now you know. But anyway, moving on from the box and onto the car, next up in the quirks and features, I want to discuss the spare key. Now, there was a spot in the box for the spare key. Right next to the owner's manual, there's a little hole, but I've taken the spare key out because I want to highlight the fact that it is just a Volkswagen Audi folding key. You have the Bugatti logo on one side, you have lock and unlock on the other side, that's it. I had this exact same key in a 2001 Audi A4 that I owned, and here it is in a $3.5 million exotic supercar. Now, as I recall, the Bugatti Veyron, the predecessor to this car, that was the only key. It was just sort of a modified Volkswagen key. At least here, it's the spare key, and the actual key is nicer, but it's still funny to see them giving that reused, recycled, it's got to be a 15-year-old part that you get in a Volkswagen Jetta, and here it is in the Bugatti Chiron. But anyway, the interior of this car. Now, I'm not going to go over every single little thing in here like I usually do for supercars, hypercars at this price point, because I've already done the Bugatti Chiron review, and I recently did the Bugatti Divo, which is pretty similar, but I do want to cover the highlights. And the first highlight that you notice when you climb in here is the interior materials in this car. Unlike in the regular Chiron, where you have beautiful, fine leather and aluminum everywhere, this car trades that stuff out for carbon fiber and Alcantara. It's trying to save weight and trying to get more racy and give it a sportier, track-focused feel to go along with the pure sport ideology. It's stuff like that, interior materials and other weight savings, that have helped this car shed about 110 pounds compared to a regular Bugatti Chiron. Not a huge number for a car that's relatively heavy like this one is, but it's still something. Makes it a little lighter for racetrack driving. But anyway, next up, I want to move on to these very distinctive displays and dials in the center console of this car. You can see there are 4 specific dials, and right now they are displaying at the very top, you have your horsepower that you're currently using. Then right below that, you have your current speed that you're traveling. Then below that, you have the RPM that you're currently at. And then below that, you have the gear that you're in. 4 different dials with 4 different displays, and you can change them to be various different things. You go into the gauge cluster and you can adjust the center display to show a multitude of different items. For instance, if you go into performance mode in the gauge cluster and select that, you can see now of these center displays are showing things like the top speed that you have achieved during this trip. If you go into cruise mode in the gauge cluster, you can see now these center displays are showing things like your average speed, your cruising range, and your average fuel economy. Amazing that this car even offers the ability to check that, but it does. So you can set these displays to show basically whatever it is that you want. And check this out, there's a little hidden Easter egg with these displays. On the very bottom display, there's a little button with arrows pointing. If you press that and hold it down, then the displays, as you can see, are now showing your climate controls. So you can adjust where the air is coming out, your fan speed, your climate temperature, and on the bottom, you can adjust your heated seats. You press this little button with the arrows, but don't hold it down, and you can switch which seat you're adjusting, and then you twist the little dial around the display, and that lets you adjust the heated seat amount. Now, if you hold down this bottom button again, that will take your center displays back to whatever you had them displaying before, and you can toggle between the display that you've selected with like your speed or whatever, or your climate controls by pressing and holding down that button. Now, you might be thinking, this is an expensive car. Why didn't they just give it a center touchscreen like everything else? Cheap cars have touchscreens. Why doesn't this? But there's a good reason for it. Bugatti knows these cars will be preserved, and in 50, 60, 100 years, they will still be around and they'll still be special. And if Bugatti had put a center touchscreen in here, it would start to look outdated very, very quickly. And so by minimizing the amount of screens in this car and instead going with these displays and dials, you've essentially sort of future-proofed the car. You've made sure it won't look so outdated and terrible when it's parked at a concours d'elegance in 35 years. People won't look in and laugh at the terrible old screen. And by the way, speaking of relatively subtle controls in this car, how about the cruise control system? This car has cruise control, but figuring out how to operate it is a bit of a challenge. It's on the turn signal stalk, and it's confined to just two little controls. For one, there's a little switch you can turn from on to off that activates or deactivates cruise control. And then there's a little switch at the end of the signal stalk that lets you adjust the speed higher or lower. That's it. There's no half of the steering wheel devoted to all sorts of cruise control buttons. You just have two little ones sort of subtly placed there. You probably wouldn't even know you have it. Next, I'm moving on to some other stuff that's cool in here. For one, the roof has these glass panels, which are very beautiful. You have one on the driver's side, one on the passenger side. A lot of these cars have a fixed coupe hardtop roof, which kind of makes the interior feel a little bit claustrophobic. I like these glass panels because it brings in the outside, makes it feel more open, less claustrophobic in here, although these panels don't open. And as you can see, you can get some sun through here, so some people tint the panels. Unfortunately, they don't operate where you just press the button and it auto tints like in some cars. This is just what you have. And speaking of the ceiling in this car, one of my very favorite interior items in new Bugatti models is the interior ambient light, which is this light pipe that goes all the way from the ceiling all the way down behind the seats and then almost into the center console. It's this giant sort of C shape, which is intended to mimic that same shape on the outside of the car. You can see sort of going around the door and then curving up over the roof. That is carried into the interior with the light. So how does it operate as a light? Well, you move this little switch on the ceiling and that turns the light on, and then that's your interior dome light. In your car, probably just a little dome light on the ceiling. In this, it's this gorgeous C shape going all the way through the interior. Very cool. Next up, I want to talk about engine starting in this car. To start the engine, you press this giant red button on the steering wheel marked engine, and that turns the car on. Now, there is a little key slot on the dashboard next to the steering column where you can insert the key, but you don't have to do that in order to start the engine. This car has a proximity key, so it will know if the key is in the car and it will let you start the engine, or you can put it in that slot if you want to. Now, also worth noting, over on the other side of the steering wheel, there's another red button. That's actually a dial, and you can use it to cycle through various different modes. You have like a highway mode, a high performance mode, a regular Bugatti mode, and then over on the left, an arrow pointing up, that activates the lifter, and so you twist the dial to that, and then the lift will go up, so you can clear sort of like driveways that might be steep or anything else where you might fear that you'll scrape your Pure Sport. Also worth discussing in here is the operation of the gear lever, which is rather unusual. When you start the car, it's in sort of the center. To put it in drive, you move it over to the right, then you're in drive, and it goes back to the center. If you want to put it in neutral, move it to the left, you're in neutral, and again, it goes back to the center. And if you want to put it in reverse, move it to the left and then down, then you're in reverse, but again, it pops back to the center. Now, if you want to upshift or downshift while you're driving the car, you can move the gear lever forward or backwards for upshift and downshift, or you can just use the paddles on the steering wheel like most cars have. Your last operation with this gear lever, if you want to put it in park, you press the top, it's actually a button, and then the car goes into park. Kind of a strange operation, but you do get used to it. To me though, one of this car's most amazing features is the sheer attention to detail in pretty much every space you can possibly find. As an example, in the door panel, the storage pocket, you open it up and you have the exterior color of the car in your door panel storage pocket. You probably won't get in there all that often or see it all that often, but it's there for when you do. And the attention to detail goes way beyond that. The power window switches are even trimmed in the exterior color. A lot of new cars offer like exterior colored stitching inside. Power window switch trim. That is the level of attention to detail that Bugatti is on. And check this out. Open up the glove box and you have the exterior color brought into the interior even there. Again, a space you'll never use. You'll probably fill it. You won't even see the exterior color, but no space in this car was not beautifully thought about and perfectly thought through to make it as perfect and detailed as possible. With that said, even in the interior of a Bugatti, there are some drawbacks. And in this case, to me, the biggest one is the fact that it has manual seats, or at least manual forward or backward. You have to lift a little lever in front and then slide your weight forward or backward to move the seats around. Now, Bugatti would tell you they did this because it's this high performance handling version of the Chiron, and they saved weight by removing the power seat. But this car has a power backrest and a power seat bottom to go up and down. It just doesn't have a power forward or backward movement. So the seat motors are all still there. They haven't really saved any weight. It's just a gimmick so people can tell their passengers, oh, this has manual seats because it's the track-focused handling version. So we've saved weight from your luxury model. It's such a ridiculous gimmick. I mean, come on, this has heated seats. If you have heated seats, you're not really that focused on weight savings. You can cut the act and put the power seats back in. And speaking of the seats, this car has child seat anchors. You can see behind the passenger seat, this little panel presumably lifts off and you can anchor a child seat here. So you can take a child in your Bugatti Chiron, but you don't have power seats. Kind of stupid. And next up, moving outside the Chiron Pur Sport, where this car has some more obvious changes compared to the regular Chiron, in addition to the ones inside. Probably the most obvious is this wing, this large fixed wing back here. The regular Chiron also has a wing, but it's adjustable. It goes up or down when the car meets certain conditions, but this wing on the Pur Sport is fixed in place, and it is huge, massive in fact, spanning the entire width of the car, obviously intending to provide more downforce, again for better handling and track capabilities. And there's more to it than that. In the back you can see a completely different exhaust outlet compared to the regular Chiron. That's because the Pur Sport has a 3D printed aluminum exhaust. It looks more aggressive and it sounds more aggressive too. Take a listen to this car revving. And next up, another change to the Pur Sport over the regular Chiron is the wheels. You can see the spokes have little holes in them. Bugatti calls these aero blades, and they are designed to channel air in a particular direction. Again, to improve downforce, you have your little aero blades in the wheels. A very interesting and unusual design. You wouldn't see it unless you look closely, but they're there and very unusual. You don't see too many holes in the wheel spokes of very many vehicles. Now, speaking of the wheels, I want to talk tires. This car uses Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2R tires that were co-developed with Michelin specifically for this car. They are very grippy, and they are again intended to improve handling by having grippier tires than the standard Chiron. And finally, one other notable handling related change made to the Chiron Pur Sport over the regular Chiron. This car has stiffer suspension than the regular Chiron. Sportier, more aggressive suspension. Now the result is the ride quality probably isn't quite as good, but stiffer suspension makes generally for better handling, and so they've done it for this car. This is the enthusiast spec of the Bugatti Chiron. And next up, we move on to the rest of the exterior items with this car, starting up front with this very aggressive front end design. You can see the traditional Bugatti grille, but around that you have giant air intakes and a much more aggressive carbon fiber front splitter than the standard Chiron, again to underscore that this is the more aggressive track focused model. But this car in front does carry over one thing I love from the Chiron, and that would be the headlights. When they are on, you can see the running lights are these 4 squares on each side, tremendously distinctive, and when you put on the turn signal, you have these little turn signal lights underlining each one of the 4 squares. Again, tremendously distinctive. I love that look up front when this car is on, but I especially love what happens with these lights when you walk up to the car and unlock it. You tap the unlock button and you can see the lights put on a little show as they light up to illuminate and let you know that it's your car. And I like that little welcome lighting design. A lot of automakers are doing this, but this is one of my favorite welcomes to the car. And next up, moving on to the back of the Pur Sport, very distinctive back here too, not just because of the wing and the giant exhaust, but frankly, the entire rear end. Again, far more aggressive than the standard Chiron in the case of this rear diffuser. Tons of carbon fiber back here. Very, very obviously more aggressive than the regular car, and a very distinctive look. Now, you do have an interesting lighting design back here. You have a giant light bar, thin strip that goes across the entire rear of the car, and you also have some rather strange looking taillights. They have this sort of arrow design to them. You can see when the rear turn signal is on how they sort of light up. It's an interesting look for sure. And again, very Bugatti. Nobody else is using anything even close to this look. And next up, moving on to another interesting quirk of the Chiron. It doesn't really tell you what it is on the outside. You do have some Bugatti logos, front, rear on the wheels, that sort of thing, but it doesn't really say Chiron anywhere or Pur Sport, except in 2 places. One is this little door, fuel door looking thing on the driver's side, and the other is this little fuel door looking thing on the passenger side, where in both cases it says Chiron Pur Sport, but that is all. So you might be wondering, why 2 fuel doors? What do those do? Well, over on the passenger side, you push it open and that's where you add fuel. You pull up to a gas pump, you put the gas in. Pretty simple, just like basically every car. On the driver's side, that little fuel door thing is where you add oil. You pop that open, a little button inside the car, and then you can put oil in the engine there in case it's running low. Now, you might be wondering, why do you put oil into like a fuel door instead of around the engine like basically every other car? And the reason for that is, in this car, you can't access the engine. This rear cover doesn't come off, except at the Bugatti dealership where trained technicians can remove it. Instead, it's fixed in place. You can't pull it off. You don't have access to the engine, but you can see a little bit of the engine from the top, and it is beautiful, with Bugatti logos reminding you exactly what this engine is. This thing isn't screwing around. I just love looking into this engine bay and seeing that massive 16-cylinder, 1,500 horsepower engine. It is a serious piece of machinery. Now, as you can see, going over the engine bay is this line that sort of bisects it, cuts it right in half. That line starts on the roof of the car above the passenger compartment, and it goes all the way to the back. It's sort of a beauty line that traces the shape of the car as it goes further back, and frankly, I think it looks pretty cool. And finally, we move into the front compartment in this Chiron Pur Sport. This is the trunk, the only real luggage space you get with this car. And you can see it's pretty small, and it's even smaller because there's this metal strip that sort of cuts it in half that's placed in the middle of it. The reason they do this is for compliance purposes. If the cargo area is large enough to fit like a small child, then you have to install an emergency inside trunk release so the child could get out if they accidentally fall in or get kidnapped or whatever. By putting this like blade thing in the center, it splits up the cargo area into 2 smaller components, neither of which mandate that they put in an interior trunk release. Most owners who actually want to use this luggage space can simply remove this after they buy the car, but when they sell it new, this has to be there, or else the car isn't complying with the regulation about the interior latch. Very interesting. And there are a few other interesting things about this cargo area. For one, you have a nice plaque in here that reminds you this is a limited edition 1 of 60 Pur Sport model. wheel. That's cool to see. You also have another label in here, this time a warning label that lets you know the temperature inside this trunk may exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit or 50 Celsius. It's letting you know it could heat up in here, so don't put anything that wouldn't do well with heat in your trunk because it might not go well. Maybe there'd be a fire. Just wants to let you know. Two other important items in here worth mentioning. For one, inside this little Bugatti branded case, this is where the battery charger is. I mentioned before it comes in the Bugatti box, but in this case it's out and it's right here. You also have a tire inflator kit in here over to the side, sort of molded to the shape of the cargo area. Obviously this doesn't come with a spare tire, so your tire inflator kit is all you get just in case you have a flat in your Bugatti and you want to try to fix it by the side of the road. Unlikely. And so those are the quirks and features of the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Pur Sport. Wearing a mask because I have someone with me from Bugatti Newport Beach. Obviously, I should not be trusted to drive a vehicle like this by myself. It's terrifying, you know, getting in this car. The first thing you think, you just have intimidation. You can't not. This is like the 5th or 6th Bugatti I've reviewed on my channel. But every time, I still feel incredibly intimidated. These are unbelievably valuable cars. The good thing about this car, though, is it feels pretty drivable. So as these cars go, it is intimidating because the value is intimidating, but unlike, for instance, the McLaren P1 GTR, which I recently reviewed, that car was intimidating from a driving perspective. You felt like it might try to kill you. This car is just intimidating from a value perspective because you can drive it pretty easily and pretty well. All right, I'm gonna step on it here. Oh my God, there are few cars on earth with acceleration like that. Wow, the road just comes at you so fast. You just don't have time to react if there's like something in the road. I mean, it's just an unbelievable speed. It's hard to describe. It's funny because you drive a 458, and a lot of people watching these have driven 911s or things like that, and you think they're fast, and they are. Those are fast cars. But there's like a whole other level of speed when you spend this much and when you get into this level of rarefication with a car that just, it takes it into a completely different world. I mean, you can just feel your eyes going back in your head. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before, acceleration like this. And this car delivers it very well. You know, a lot of the really, really fast exotic sports cars I drive, the Koenigseggs, the P1 GTR, they're pretty rough. And to an extent, that's kind of a cool thing. You feel it, you hear it, it's all coming at you. This car, though, is a lot more, and this is one of the things I've always loved about this car, it's a lot more Bentley-like. It's a lot more luxurious. You get the amazing acceleration of the craziest car on the planet, but it's relatively comfortable and easy while you do it. And if you want to just sit here and go 40, you can do that too. I am just amazed by the performance of this car, but I am also amazed by the comfortability. You can definitely tell it's harsher in here, though, than in a regular Chiron. The ride quality is definitely a little rougher, with the intent, obviously, better handling. That's the whole point of this car. And you can tell the suspension has been firmed up to make that possible. There's nothing comparable that I can even explain the acceleration feels like. It's like nothing on the planet. It's unbelievable. It's so much faster than any of the fastest roller coasters I've ever been on. Maybe rocket ships feel like this. I just cannot believe how fast this car feels when you accelerate hard. And I also can't believe how then docile it feels if you just want to drive normally. It definitely does feel like it handles better than the Chiron. You can tell it's surprising. They haven't lost that much weight, but there's enough little tuning in various different areas, suspension and tires, that you can tell it has a little bit more of an immediate feel to it, a little bit more of a sports car feel, frankly. It's indescribable. It is so fast and it feels so effortless. It's so fast that, I mean, even 2 seconds on the throttle, you're already way, way too fast in any reasonable life situation. And the road is now coming at you at a speed that is too quick for you to even react to it. And so you have to have a big, wide open space, and even then, a lot of courage for you to be able to really get on it. What an unbelievable thing. It is so cool. And I still love the fact that they're able to make it so luxurious and feel so nice in here. I totally think you could daily drive this if you were willing to stomach the maintenance and running costs. It's just one of the best all-around cars. And I do think that this one has a little bit more of a kind of sport anger to it, as Bugatti suggests it does with the name Pur Sport and with all the changes they've made to make it more handling focused. And so that's the Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport. This car shares a lot with the regular Chiron and frankly with the Bugatti Divo, but that's fine with me because those are two of the most amazing cars I've ever driven, and so is this one. Beautiful car, unbelievable craftsmanship, fantastic technology, amazing performance. And now it's time to give the Pur Sport a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, the Pur Sport is obviously a gorgeous car. Not perfect, but very lovely, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Acceleration is insane, and it gets a 10 out of 10. Handling is strong, but like other Bugattis, not quite on the level of precision and amazement as some other insane hypercars, and it gets a 9 out of 10. Fun factor is as good as it gets, 10 out of 10, and obviously the same with cool factor. These are insanely cool and head-turning, and it gets a 10 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 48 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. This car has some great stuff, though not all the top modern tech, no surprise, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Comfort is excellent for a car like this, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Quality is fantastic for a supercar, but reliability is a bit of a question, and it gets a 7 out of 10. Practicality is low. Not only is it only 2 seats and very small in a cargo area, but it's so expensive, it's just hard to practically drive it anywhere, and it gets a 1 out of 10. Finally, value, and it's insanely expensive, but it's also one of the great performance cars of all time, and it gets a 6 out of 10 for a total daily score of 25 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 73 out of 100, which places it here against rival hypercars I've tested. Truthfully, I don't see much difference here between this, the regular Chiron, and the Divo. They're all great, but they're all very similar. The Pur Sport seems like it's essentially Divo handling and driving experience with Chiron styling, and frankly, that might be the best of all worlds.